Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Croxford. I'm the office manager for the regional chancellor at the University of South Florida, Sarasota-Manatee, and we've been bringing you the summer grant writing program for 7 weeks now. And this is actually our last funding Friday. And we are delighted to have a guest speaker with us, whom Sandy will introduce shortly. As usual, I'll be monitoring the chat. If you have questions, we ask you to type those into the chat, and I will go ahead and like those so that you know they've been seen. And then when Dr. Littlefield pauses during her presentation, we'll ask those questions for you. At some point, we will also encourage you to unmute and engage with Dr. Littlefield face to face, as it were, and she'll be able to answer questions in that way too. We appreciate the dialogue. We actually encourage that. So that'll be wonderful. I'll turn this over to Sandy, who will introduce Dr. Littlefield, and we'll start today's session.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the summer grant writing workshops as we close out our summer. It has been a great journey. I appreciate everyone tuning in, and know that this is being recorded. So those who are in different time zones or had conflicts will be watching this video subsequently, and that is terrific. This will live in memoriam on our YouTube page. So thank you, Dr. Littlefield, for that. Dr. Littlefield is brilliant. I had the benefit of meeting her through NORDUP, through a mentoring program many years ago. And I knew automatically that we would be friends. She's got a PhD in physiology and biophysics. She's not only beautiful, but also brilliant. And from her academic leadership role to now serving as a program officer, a rotator for the National Science Foundation in the Granted program, a brand new program that's like no other. And she has really lifted and expanded what we understand as a research enterprise and how we can all play an important role in building the nation's workforce and the capacity for research. So it's with great pleasure and that I bring this thought leader to us. What I'm hoping is that she encourages you, no matter what your role is, whether you're a staff person or a faculty person, whether you're at a university or at a clinic or a library, think about how you can contribute to, through the Granted program, building the research enterprise so that we remain a global leader for research. So thank you so much, and welcome, Dr. Littlefield.
Sandy, thank you so much for those kind words. That was like the best introduction I think I've ever had. It just it means so much when you know people through a long professional journey like Sandy and I have had together through NORDUP. And I want to thank you and your team for this fantastic program, for the opportunity to talk about Granted, to bring this, like you said, wholly new capacity building opportunity to the community. So with that, I guess I'll second Sandy's words. No matter what your role, no matter where you come from, Granted, I hope you'll find has something for you to engage with, to bring to a colleague. It's a very exciting initiative, and I'm anxious to tell you more about it. So I am actually one of three team members, Granted team members. As Sandy said, I'm a rotational program director on loan from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And if there's anybody from UNCG here with us today, hello, and I miss campus and I miss you all. Joining me on the backside at NSF are Alicia Needler, who is really the Granted visionary. She's the head of the Office of Integrative Activities, which is where Granted lives. And then Dina Meyer-Stroud, who is really my partner in crime. We work shoulder to shoulder to really push through the technical parts of the program. And we also just really enjoy the outreach aspects like this. So granted, again, we call it granted, but it's really an acronym in the spirit of all NSF great acronyms. So granted is Growing Research Access for Nationally Transformative Equity and Diversity. And so granted is just a great way to sum that all up. And as I hope you'll see, it's new and exciting, and we love to talk about it. So I promised Alicia that I would start with this slide and to let you all know that right now is a terrific time to apply to the National Science Foundation. NSF funds and supports research projects that expand knowledge, expand fields in science, engineering, and education, as well as those that seek to increase the capacity of the U.S. to conduct and exploit such research and scholarship. It's a terrific time to apply to NSF. So got I think a comfortable agenda today. We're gonna do a couple of polls to warm up the Zoom room. I mean, it's Friday afternoon. We have to sort of get to know each other the best way we can in this large forum. I'll talk a little bit about how the granted initiative, the lens through which we think about the research enterprise. I'll talk about the initiative itself and our funding opportunities. We'll talk about how to develop a competitive granted proposal, and a lot of the same things that go into developing a competitive granted proposal go into developing a competitive NSF proposal. So I'm hopeful that everyone can take away something from that discussion. We'll talk a little bit about what's next for granted. I'll give you my contact information, and we can have some direct Q&A, or at least Zoom profile to Zoom profile Q&A, just like Dave had suggested. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. So let's talk a little bit about warming up the room. So Dave's going to help me, and we've got some polls. And so the first poll, Dave, if you want to pull that up again, just to sort of warm up the room here. Okay, so I'm interested, and maybe you all know each other because you've been doing this for 7 weeks, but what's your role at your institution? Faculty, administrative, research support staff? All right, nice. Looks like we're topping out there around maybe 60-40. 60% faculty, or I'm sorry, 60% research support, and maybe 40% faculty. That's great. That's a really fantastic mix of roles that are here to talk about granted. So thank you for that. Okay, Dave, you want to pull up our second poll. And again, this is as much to sort of let everybody understand who's in the Zoom room, but also for me to sort of tailor the talk a little bit to who's here. Okay, so are you familiar with the NSF Granted Initiative? Have you ever heard of it? Okay, looks like maybe about 50-50 in a round off. Yes, no. Okay,
Pretty
so
close.
yeah, I was gonna say plenty of opportunity to bring some new information to folks, which is really, really exciting. It's always really exciting to be able to introduce something like this to new folks. So, okay, thanks. All right, so now if I can, my research administration colleagues, take a break for a second. I know we've got about 40% of our participants as faculty. The next two polls are actually faculty centric, because I'd really like to understand your thoughts about some things. So faculty participants only for the next poll, please. So how important is it that you have access to administrative research support expertise to participate in research scholarship and/or creative activities? I was hoping to see that. 50-50 about. Got a few faculty who get by without perhaps administrative support. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And then the last poll, Dave, if you will, for those folks that have access to research support, which sectors or sectors of the research support ecosystem do you engage with most often? So that could be pre-award research administration, post-award research development, research compliance, tech transfer, your research leadership. Which sectors are you engaging with the most? Oh, I forgot the entire list is there. Corporate foundation relationships, student research management, and about 13% or 3 of 24 of 25 respondents don't have access to research support expertise. That's a tough situation to be in. Thank you all. This is very helpful. It's unique to be able to talk directly to faculty participants and to get this kind of data to bring back to the team. So thank you very much for contributing your answers and participating in the polls. This is great information that I'm going to take back to the granted team. Thanks, Dave, for running those polls. That was great. We've got
My
some
pleasure. We have the results downloaded for you.
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, let's go on. Let's talk about the research enterprise then. So, the granted team, and I think most everybody at NSF thinks about the research enterprise as largely being made up of these two sort of ecosystems, right? The institutions and organizations that folks conduct their research, scholarship, and creative activity at. These are the facilities, these are the facilities we're at, the equipment that we use, the resources, databases or, auditoriums where folks are doing their work. And also the investigators, teams, and trainees, the experts who have disciplinary knowledge, who form the scientific and research networks, the folks who are really the discovery, technology, and innovation pipeline. But granted, we wanted to add a third leg to this stool, a third ecosystem, if you will. And that's really been focused in our initiative on the fact that a strong national research enterprise relies on more than funding for the research itself. And that's, I think, one of our most provocative statements in our program description funding opportunity. In order to have a strong research enterprise, we have to build capacity and capability in the largely invisible, critical infrastructure that operationalizes research. And the granted initiative, wholly new, wholly unlike anything else that's at NSF, focuses on the research support and service infrastructure ecosystem within the research enterprise. So granted is looking to support human capacity building by adding human capital. We're looking to develop great information and new intellectual merit around policies, practices, and processes that help build a strong research enterprise. And we're looking to catalyze partnerships, not only between academic institutions, academic research partners, but also amongst professional societies and organizations that house a lot of the knowledge about how to build capacity and what best practices are out there right now. So human capital, policies, practices, and processes, and partnerships. That's what Granted is all about. So the research enterprise support infrastructure, just extending the lens with which Granted looks at this ecosystem, we really break it down into distinct sectors. And, that was alluded to in the sectors that I asked you all, our faculty participants, to comment about where you've engaged with this ecosystem. So we are looking to support research development, pre and post award research administration, technology transfer, corporate relations, public-private partnerships, research integrity. Really important part of this ecosystem. Research leadership, student research training management infrastructure. We've also, now this is the first iteration of the Granted wheel, if you will, but we're also seeing it evolve to include more cross-sectional types of activities, such as research communications and broader impact and research analytics. So it's likely that we'll see a version 2 of the NSF Granted wheel coming up soon. But these are the sectors, if you will, of the research support and service infrastructure ecosystem within the larger enterprise that Granted is focused on. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about the research enterprises in the US. So here are all the different sectors that we've just introduced as being part of the sort of the Granted support portfolio, if you will. And I just want you to think for a moment, if you're at a well-resourced comprehensive R1 or an R2, it's likely that you have an office for research development. You certainly have a pre and post award office, and you may have one or many, at least one or many people who work in those offices to support each of those sectors and each part of the research enterprise. Contrast that with folks that work in primarily undergraduate institutions and in some emerging research institutions where there may only be one person in the entire institution that wears all the hats that help faculty manage research development, research compliance, research policy, how you interact with it, developing and navigating through research processes. And yes, the missions of R1 and R2 institutions are different than primarily undergraduate and some emerging research institutions, but there is still so much talent, so much potential research, discovery, and innovation in primarily undergraduate institutions and other types of emerging research institutions. And we know that we see fewer submissions from institutions that have less access to research support and service infrastructure. And so what Granted is really focused on is trying to help build the capacity for research support and service infrastructure in institutions that don't have it. Now, we'll get into this a little bit later. That doesn't mean that R1 and R2 institutions, there's not something for them for Granted. What we're really trying to do is broaden and diversify participation in the research enterprise, and specifically doing that through provisioning research support and service infrastructure. Now, what are the other challenges within the research enterprise that we know? I mean, we know about these staffing issues, but what else? Well, we know that there are diverse work environments, hybrid versus, remote versus all in person, that contribute to wide disparities in hiring and attrition rates for research support staff. I mean, we know that there's a lot of folks that get pulled away from a smaller institution to a larger institution because of different levels of compensation and, again, remote work access. We know that training is available, but not equitably accessible. And this also leads to wide disparities in staff capability and access to professional society engagement and other networks. Again, if you're one person and you're working, in a primarily undergraduate institution that maybe doesn't have the funding for you to go to a professional society, you're isolated. You don't have access to other colleagues. So federal funding, we know, is not distributed equitably or broadly across the national research enterprise. We know that. And so with Granted, we're trying to intervene, if you will, provide a mechanism to broaden and diversify that participation by providing support for research support. And then finally, investment in research support and sponsored project management resources often doesn't match faculty need, expectations, and or the institutional mission. And this is a really big one. We hear from a lot of faculty at primarily undergraduate institutions who are hungry to do research, but they just don't have the research support infrastructure there to facilitate it. And so that really requires a conversation with your institutional leadership to say, where are we going? What can we do to not only satisfy my ambition to do research, but also to bring research to our students, right? I can do that by bringing research here in through my lab. I can bring research opportunities to the students. And as we bring all components of this together, right, we are growing the research enterprise nationally and institutionally. So why NSF Granted? How did this even come about? Why were we able to even launch this? So a big part of it was the CHIPS and Science legislation, and the federal government actually defining the term emerging research institution and saying, listen, we are going to target institutions with less than $50 million of federal research expenditures in a year to help those institutions grow and broaden their participation in research activities. So that came down from, the federal government. And so honoring CHIPS and Science, we at NSF brought through Granted. So we also know that NSF is focused on increasing proposals, and that's across NSF. So yes, we want to see lots of proposals come into Granted, but as you know, Congress funds NSF, and over the past decade or so, we've seen our proposal submission rate decrease. And, at some point, Congress is going to say, well, if people aren't submitting to NSF, you must not need the budget that you're asking for. And so that's kind of a vicious cycle, because the less money that Congress awards, the less money we have for research, and the less proposals we can fund. So we always want to show Congress that we have a need. And our aim is to grow total number of proposals coming into NSF by 10%. So that's our annual priority goal across the institution. We want to, with Granted, grow awareness and knowledge of research enterprise staff and functions. So, I'm confident that the faculty participants that are with us today know what research support and service infrastructure is, but I guarantee you that there are many more colleagues out there who either because they don't have access to it or really haven't really thought about the critical infrastructure that is largely invisible to them, that supports all of the research adjacent activities that they need to actually do their research, scholarship, and creative activity. And granted is a way to bring awareness to this really critical workforce. And then finally, it's really compelling when you call out the fact that almost $100 billion was expended by colleges and universities in fiscal year 22 to do research and development. And so, I mean, that's a lot of funding. And if an institution or a faculty member does not have access to research support expertise to be able to submit a competitive proposal, or when a proposal is awarded, yay, great, you submitted a proposal. Now, how do I implement it and expend the funding? They're not going to be able, and their institution is not going to be able to participate in this enterprise, in this $100 billion enterprise. And so again, this is why Granted exists. And we've had a little help from CHIPS and Science and our agency priority goals to get this engine running. So let me give you just a quick short history. It's short because we're only about a year and 3/4 old as far as the initiative goes. So past to present. So we started with a conference convening and workshop funding opportunity through a Dear Colleague letter. Very unusual to draw proposals and award funding out of a DCL, but we did, and we got a very robust response. In fact, you can talk to Sandy, and I'm sure other folks in the Zoom room who are granted convening workshop PIs got a very robust response in terms of calling for reviewers as well. We started our granted reviewer base when we had our first DCL funding opportunity. Soon towards the end of the DCL close date, so right around February of 2023, we opened our now existing program description funding opportunity. So this is the sort of master funding opportunity for the Granted initiative. It's 23-221Y, and it is a mechanism, big, broad. You can almost drive a truck through it with what kind of ideas we're looking for. But the gist of it is we're looking for bold, ambitious ideas about how to create research, support, and service infrastructure capacity with a vision for not only transforming the institution where the project's going to occur, but for a broader vision about how the model that's being created with the funding or with the project could be used, translated, scaled at other institutions to also similarly grow capacity and capability. And it's really in that way, sort of institution by institution, that we see national transformation. So again, we're moving along with recruiting reviewers, and I'll tell you a little bit. We've got about 700 volunteer reviewers at this point. We're always looking for more reviewers from this community, and you can find the sign up to be a Granted reviewer on the Granted website. Just to let you know, we went from an ad hoc process reviewing our conference proposals to a panel, to running panels. We're running panels every month. And so we're just really ecstatic that the engine is going. Just recently, we've had a couple of DCLs come out, another, and this is again to supplement the main program description funding opportunity. There was a call that encouraged post-award sector development, and then another Dear Colleague letter that really helps frame and maybe shape a little bit what the Granted program description funding opportunity is looking for. We heard from folks early on that, wow, this is too big. It's really difficult to get our heads around what this means. And I encourage you to look at DCL 23-153 to get some additional ideas about what Granted is looking for and what the initiative will support. So just time out for some clarifications, because I know a lot of people are probably used to seeing program solicitations or dear colleague letters come out of NSF. But again, the program description that we have open, that Granted has open at this point, it's like a home base for funding for a program. I don't expect that Granted will be putting out a program solicitation. We'll probably augment this home base funding description opportunity with additional dear colleague letters. It's typically used in divisions of NSF. So, or in this case, the Office of Integrative Activities that have been around for a long time, like us, and look to, various types of research areas, maybe in this case, a little unconventional research area. The researchers in disciplinary areas know to apply to position descriptions over and over again. And we hope to instill that same confidence in our research support community, right? That you just know that you can go to that program description funding opportunity if you want to apply for a planning proposal, if you want to do a workshop, if you want to put in a full granted project. So again, that's 23-221Y. Solicitations, just, little NSF primer here, usually have time bound. They're usually time bound. They aren't a base of funding for a particular division or program at NSF, and they're often short-lived. So that's really the difference, the big difference between program description funding opportunities and solicitations. Dear colleague letters, in this case, we also think of them as funding opportunities and as sort of large blinking lights to direct people to a more nuanced understanding or an encouragement to focus on different parts of the funding opportunity or different parts of the discipline, or in this case, different parts of the research support and service ecosystem that Granted will support. And then finally, NSF does use broad agency announcements, BAAs. This has been normally or most recently used by the TIP Directorate and NCSES. Those are very sort of very large types of funding opportunities. So that was just time out for some clarifications. Before I go on, Dave, you'll have to help me with this. I should stop and ask if anybody has any questions, because we're gonna actually talk about the program description in some detail and we'll start getting into how to put together a competitive granted proposal. So does anybody have any questions thus far?
I don't have anything in chat for you, Dr. Littlefield, but if someone would like to ask one, we could certainly do that now.
Okay, well, let's just forge on. Let's see, maybe I see one in chat, but Dave, you're monitoring the chat. So if anything comes up, again, just stop me. But let's talk about the program description in a little more detail. And again, I think everybody has a copy of this presentation through Canvas or the learning management system that you're using. Anything that's underlined in the presentation should be a hyperlink so you can get there quick. But again, so what the granted program description funding opportunity intends to support: bold, ambitious ideas that will increase access, catalyze national transformation, and really address the systemic inequity and diversity issues in the research enterprise. Bold, ambitious projects, models, if you will, of what will increase and grow access to research support capacity and capability. So like any other disciplinary specific projects, the projects that come to Granted have to be fully developed and described within a project description. So we're talking about a 15-page proposal. We are strongly encouraging PIs and co-PIs to come from our research support, administrative research enterprise staff. These are the folks that eat, sleep, live, breathe the successes as well as the gaps, challenges, and opportunities that can be brought forth in a presentation and put into the context of an intervention, right, to build capacity and an enterprise. And then because of the way the program description, funding opportunity is set up, and the budget, which I'll tell you a little bit more in a minute, ask for what you need. I mean, the gist of it is that there's no budget floor and there's no budget ceiling. And so we really want to encourage folks, and this community, this research support and service infrastructure community, is very good at tightly aligning a scope of work to a budget, right? And we don't want people to be constrained by a budget if they want to build ambitious capacity in their institution. So let's talk a little bit. It's important to know what it is, but it's also important to know what it's not. So granted is it's not a limited submission. The funding opportunity is not a limited submission. There's no deadline. So it's a rolling deadline. And some people like that, some people don't. Again, there's no budget floor, there's no budget cap. We tell folks that the project term should be, no more than 5 years. It's tougher for NSF to fund a project that's longer than 5 years. Again, there's granted is for everyone. So granted does not discourage any type of higher education institution or nonprofit or any institution that is generally has general eligibility to apply to NSF can apply for granted support. What granted, is really specific though about is that it does not fund disciplinary research. And this is disciplinary research when it's coming for faculty support, postdoc support, or student support. And the reason that is because there are 8 other directorates at NSF that specifically do fund disciplinary research. So what granted will fund, I know we're talking about what it's not, is research on the research enterprise. So I think that's the big differentiator. Granted will also generally not support faculty training, although there's an asterisk on there, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, buyouts or incentives. So all of these things, some combination, will certainly increase research activity at an institution. But what granted wants to do is increase institutional capacity to grow research broadly across an institution. So, and that's by installing, research development professionals or a sponsored projects office where an institution might have one. Let's go back to faculty training in the asterisk. So what granted is not intended to do is to bring in some of these really great resources that we have in our professional societies and CORA or SRAI, or some of the expertise in consulting firms, to just bring that in and train folks how to run or how to write competitive proposals. I mean, that's certainly a great thing to do, but it's not a sustainable model. And what we're looking for are folks to really come with an idea about how to install institutional capacity so that faculty have access to expertise if they want to develop a competitive proposal, not just to NSF, but to any sponsor, whether it be federal, foundation, industry. Let's get that capacity in-house so that it's always there, not dependent on whether the institution can afford to bring in a third-party consultant or NCORA or SRAI. We really are intending to build institutional capacity. So let's talk a little bit about building a proposal. As with any proposal, a granted proposal starts with a great idea. It tells a great story. And in most cases, it involves collaboration. So I'm just going to take a second and talk a little bit about collaboration. So yes, collaboration could mean bringing in a partner or a couple of partner institutions in your project, but it doesn't need to be that. We get the question all the time, can we just present a project that, you know, builds capacity within our institution? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. You know, again, the tip or trick, if you will, to this is understanding what the relevance of that project is to the larger community, and having a vision for how that model will be translated outside of your institution to grow research capacity, research access to research capacity, research support capacity in other institutions. So yes, if you want to bring in partners, that's a great way to structure a proposal on a project. But really, every project should start with in-house collaboration, and it should start with talking to your research leadership, talking to the research support infrastructure that you have, and figuring out how the goals of the institution, the mission of the institution, how to align that information with what kind of capacity you want to build. Because it's really important as it relates to sustainability and the need to sustain this infrastructure beyond NSF support, that those things align. You know, so collaboration involves really in-house collaboration and external collaboration, if that's what the scope of your project looks like. So, but, you know, in general, you know, thinking about how to sort of frame a granted proposal is, you know, what's the need at your institution and why is it important to address this need? So set up the rationale. Tell us about what you know about what other people have done. So has anything been done to address this type of need before? And believe me, we all know that there is a paucity of literature out there that about best practices and you know, what works, what doesn't. That's one of the chief things that Granted will do. Through our awardees, we will bring much more new knowledge to the community, so that people know and have a literature base to go to. So what activities will address the need that you're proposing? How are you going to implement this project? How are you going to do it? What will the activities, you know, benefit? How will the activities benefit your institution and other institutions like yours? We really want to know what success looks like, what the measures and metrics are that you're going to use to show success, and especially how the project is relevant to building capacity at your institution. And again, this vision for building transformative change in other institutions like yours across the nation. And then finally, how will you sustain the activities after NSF support sunsets? And that's, again, something that if you're talking with your research leadership, if you're talking with your colleagues in your business support units, or whatever infrastructure you have, aligning the mission with the goals of the project, with where you want to be as an institution 5 years down the road, after you've had granted support, is really important, because then you have a great idea of how you'll sustain any capacity that you've built with the NSF investment. So I'll just tell you, this is sort of anecdotal, but I think it's roughly where we're sitting now, that our funding profile looks a lot like the agency's funding profile. So about 20% of the proposals that come in are competitive. The proposals, they just got it, right? They were able to frame the proposal and give the reviewers exactly what they were looking for. It's granted aligned. Another 20% come in, they're not competitive for some reason. It's either maybe the proposal just wasn't fully fleshed out, or you know, it wasn't aligned with the granted priorities. And then, as you might expect, there's this big middle region. About 60% of the proposals come in requiring some sort of renovation, redesign, reorganization, you know, additional information to really get to what the implementation is, what the goals are, and things like that. So what we're really trying to do here is we're trying to decrease the 60%, shrink it, and increase the number of proposals that come in competitive and ready. So that's why I'm kind of just going over all of this, just to make sure that we can help folks come in as competitive as possible. So, in that regard, here are some ideas for Granted. So, of course, strengthening the nation's research enterprise is the goal. We've talked about how to do that sort of institution at a time, institution by institution. Gains in capacity at primary undergraduate institutions, emerging research institutions, minority serving institutions is a goal, right? Because we know those institutions historically do not have the same access to research support and service infrastructure that the larger R1s and R2s do. National transformation of the research enterprise is the broader impact. When you're thinking about intellectual merit and broader impact, you can be sure of the broader impact for Granted. National transformation, and again, how do we get there? Institution by institution. But, specifically, if you want to talk about some ideas for putting together a Granted proposal, workforce development, right? We've got all these great sectors of the research enterprise, and we need to build capacity, pipelines, training programs to bring really motivated, smart people into these great careers and great jobs. So hiring research enterprise staff. If you don't have a sponsored projects office, what kind of model do you want to develop to get one started at your institution so that you can start submitting proposals and participating in the national research enterprise? Doing a research on the research enterprise type of study. There is so much we don't know about the research enterprise. One of the best parts of my job is talking to people about, ideas for what types of research projects people could do specifically on the research enterprise. And then a whole bunch of other ideas. And this is not exhaustive. This is sort of a composite of what we see and who, the folks that we talk to. But we talk about evaluating existing training programs. So evaluation projects on things, best practices and programs that are already out there to build capacity. We talk about research on sustainability of programs. As a matter of fact, we have a planning proposal that is looking at that question specifically out of University of California, San Diego. We talk about transferable and scalable ways of improving post-award project and post-award activities management. That was one of the focuses of our Dear Colleague letter. We would love to have proposals on how to develop research leadership. And then, knowledge management is certainly it's one of these aspirational goals, I think, for any directorate, any division, any office at NSF. But because Granted is new, we have an opportunity to think about innovative ways to capture the knowledge that's being created. So a knowledge management and sharing system for the research enterprise content would be an awesome Granted project. And then there are just so many ideas. And the cool thing about the Granted team is that we're taking really a research development approach to engaging with the community, right? We have various inlets, if you will, to talk about projects and their alignment with Granted. From our office hour sessions to our Granted inbox, where you can submit a project summary if you'd like some feedback about the alignment with the project idea with Granted, to just the way we manage our review processes. So again, wholly new and lots of room for interaction with the program. So technically speaking, an NSF granted proposal looks like a regular NSF proposal. All the components that you're used to putting together for an NSF proposal have to come with your granted proposal. We're going to review the proposal based on its intellectual merit and its broader impacts. We're going to need a project summary, 15 pages if you're submitting a regular granted proposal. That will include a project description, your implementation plan, and all of these different parts of the proposal and accessory documents and so forth are well described in the PAPPG. Should the PI have a PhD? Not required. Again, we're looking for the experts who live and breathe the gaps, challenges, opportunities to build research support capacity within an institutional enterprise to lead these projects. Are multiple institutions allowed? Absolutely. They can be, we're accepting collaborative proposals. We also accept proposals that have sub-awardees. So again, just like a normal or otherwise NSF submission from another directorate. We do want to see a facilities, equipment, and other resources document. We coach folks because we have a little bit of differences in how people might be committing effort through because our PIs and senior personnel are administrative staff. To explain the nuance of what might be going on with effort commitments in the facilities, equipment, and other resources document. It's also just a great place to explain what research support infrastructure is at your institution. Just so folks, just so reviewers get an idea of the starting point of where you're at. So biosketches, same thing. It's people, I think, get concerned when they don't have publications or, other affiliated documents or work, but you shouldn't. This is if you have those things, certainly list them as they relate to the project that you're presenting. But we really want to understand what folks have done, what their leadership capacity is for the project. And that may mean that they've presented at NCORA or SRAI, all these great programs to build research participation. Reviewers want to see that. So current and pending support. Yes, we got to see that, standard compliance document. But if you don't have any current support, that's not a deficit, right? The pending support, always the granted proposal would go on there as a pending support entry. We do want to see a data management and sharing plan. That's a standard request. Anything that you're going to create, we want to see how you're going to manage it, how you're going to share it. Yes, we need a budget and a budget justification. And this community is very good at putting together those documents and aligning that budget with the scope of work. And then, other requirements as directed by the PAPPG, including the collaborators and other affiliations document. And again, I think that's the document that we see most often with compliance issues, right? We have to understand, because we use that document to look at who we might invite for review. So we have to understand the relationships that folks have had with various stakeholder populations. So completing that COA document is really important. Okay, so we're getting to the tail end here. So developing a granted proposal, additional considerations, right? Again, intellectual merit, which is one of the review criteria. You're really going to want to speak to the potential of the project to create or advance knowledge about the research enterprise. Again, create new knowledge, advance knowledge about the research enterprise, about the sector where you want to build capacity. Broader impacts, again, national transformation with, and again, this comes from how are you going to transform your institution? How is the project and the transformation at your institution relevant to other institutions like yours? Again, ideas can be implementation ideas, interventions, creation or expansion of training, hiring of new staff, data collection efforts, assessments. Really, it's really only bound by your imagination. So again, Granted is seeking model projects to build research support infrastructure. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And again, collaborations are great because you likely aren't the only one who are dealing with the same challenges. So in regards to this models, I think it's good to just have an example of what a granted model looks like. So I brought two. And the first one is a project that we funded in 2023. It's called AUC Granted. I invite you to go on to the NSF website and you can search for this award. You can read the abstract. But the model that they proposed and now have been funded to implement is a shared services hub model. And it leverages the strengths and the different assets of 4 different HBCUs in the Atlanta area. And they really want to improve knowledge management among the research leadership. They want to enhance research development capacity, strengthen the research administration infrastructure, and they intend to create a new commercialization center. All of these resources to benefit all 4 institutions. So it really is truly a hub build, if you will. And again, this went to the lead institution was Spelman College in collaboration with Morehouse College, the Morehouse School of Medicine, and Clark Atlanta. Again, all 4 historically Black colleges and universities. It's a very exciting project, and it really does represent a model, a big model, right? So if another set of institutions geographically situated like these 4 are wanted to lift and translate that model, with lessons learned and what didn't work and all the bells and whistles, the intent is that they could. In this particular award, $14 million award over 5 years, and this is structured as a cooperative agreement. So we have a lot of exchange with this group and really trying to understand quarter by quarter how this group is making progress towards building their hub. You know, on the other sort of end of the funding spectrum, we have the peer model. So partnerships for enhancing ERI, emerging research institution research, right? So this is a model to stabilize and grow sponsored programs, build a culture of research on campus, and partner with a sister institution on proposal review and submission, and then evaluate it. And this project was awarded to Bradley University. They're mid-size R2, kind of on that cusp between primarily undergraduate and R2 university. This was a $2 million award. And I mean, this institution is the impact that this award is going to have on this institution, I think will just be profound. Really to, you know, set them off on their growth trajectory. So the other type of proposal that the granted funding opportunity will accept, again, is a planning proposal. And I want to give you just a little bit of a briefing on that. One, the planning proposal, if you want to submit a planning proposal, come talk to us during the granted office hour sessions on Wednesdays. It requires submission and approval of a concept outline ahead of time, and we can talk about that. And the planning proposal really, or the concept outline really has to convey the rationale, how the planning activities will be implemented, and what the outcomes of a planning project will be, especially how they will contribute to the preparation or the development of a full granted proposal. Now, if you're approved to submit a planning proposal, again, after submitting that concept outline, planning proposals, 8 pages. It's again evaluated on intellectual merit and broader impacts, which stand on their own, outside of a full granted proposals sort of concepts and future development. And again, a planning proposal is submitted under the same funding opportunity, the program description funding opportunity. Again, so it's big, right? Okay, so granted, making a difference. Let's talk about outcomes and impact. So some of the outcomes that we're already seeing from the awards and the projects that are going on, we're seeing increased access to research support and service infrastructure. People are starting to build this infrastructure. We're hoping and that we will see increased participation in research. That would be a fantastic outcome. We know people are going to generate new knowledge and advance existing knowledge. People are going to build new networks, will expand the workforce. And I think we're already well on our way to making the critical research administration workforce very visible. In terms of impact, that's a little further, that's larger, a little further, further down the road from outcomes. But we really are driving towards more equitable and diverse participation in the national research enterprise, shifts in funding flow. We want to see federal funding. We want to see sponsored research funding, in more institutions, more broadly distributed. We want to see changes in practice and policy. And that's where, collaborating with an established R1 or R2 can be a really great thing for a PUI, because sometimes PUIs do things even a lot better than an R1 or an R2 would. So how do we share and get those communications going to get the best policy and practice out there? We want to build robust and resilient enterprises. So, that don't rise and fall with different types of remote or different types of employment opportunities, right? We want folks to be happy, content, satisfied in their own institutions. And we'd love to see models that help the enterprise get there. We're on our way, and we hope one impact will be a clearer career path for research administrators, recognition of research administrators, and again, transformative change of the enterprise overall. Okay, just a little bit about what we do in terms of the proposal review. So granted proposals are reviewed by the research support and service infrastructure community, by this community. This is one way that we are explicitly broadening participation of NSF's reviewers, right? These are also the people that know what these projects, how to assess the intellectual merit and broader impacts of these types of largely implementation projects. So again, we're looking at no difference in the review criteria. Folks should plan for about 6 months from submission to understanding whether a proposal is going to be funded or not. And, a great way to gain insight about what a competitive or not so competitive granted proposal looks like is to volunteer to be a reviewer. Okay, future of granted. So we're going to happily, probably within the next month and a half, announce the addition of 2 new IPAs, 2 new rotational program directors. The granted initiative is in the fiscal year 25 budget, and NSF is busy planning for the fiscal year 26 budget. So there will be funding to support granted projects. We have additional awards that will come through the fiscal year 24 pipeline, so stay tuned for those. We're excited about getting all of those out. Like I said, we're running monthly panels because our volume is, we have a pretty good robust volume, enough to run monthly panels. And then I talked a little bit about some of the innovative community engagement work that we're doing. But you should also know that granted, Dina and I, well, and soon to be our two new colleagues, any proposal that has been recommended to be declined, we meet with the PI and the project team to talk about the reviews, so that folks are not just getting, their reviews back to them through a little link from a system, research.gov email. So we want to make sure that people understand the reviews, understand what was really the gems of the proposal, and really what the areas for improvement as far as the reviewers noted are. And again, it's just a way to encourage and talk about those things up front again before the reviews come back. So that's just another sort of innovative engagement way that we work. And then finally, here's last slide here. You can contact us several ways to be engaged with the initiative. Join the granted mailing list. We push out little tidbits of information, like when we award a new project, or when we put out a new funding opportunity or DCL, Dear Colleague letter, it would go out through the granted mailing list. Again, please come join us at office hours. You can ask general questions. We usually can accommodate a breakout room or two if you have a granted project idea that you want to talk to a granted team member about in confidence. Those are always 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight or Standard Time, whatever time we're in. And you can find the Zoom access information on the website. And then you can always email us or you can call us. But you can email us at granted@nsf.gov. Again, if you have a project idea and you want to send a project summary, it's not required. But if you're thinking, I don't really know if this is granted aligned, I just like some feedback, you're welcome to submit a project summary to us. The granted@nsf.gov website or email address is also the place to submit a concept outline. But again, I really recommend that you come to our office hour session if you're thinking about doing that. And so with that, now that I've talked, now I will ask if anybody has any questions, and happy to take questions, and happy to discuss maybe anything that wasn't clear, or any ideas that you have for granted. And
Thank you,
for
Dr. Littlefield. Hey, Lacey has a question. She wanted to know, what is the average time commitment for a volunteer reviewer?
That's a good question, Lacey. So we are trying to involve as many people from the community in the granted review process as possible. So if you volunteer to review for granted, it doesn't automatically mean that you'll be selected, because we are very intentional about the expertise, demographics, geographical diversity, institutional diversity, of the panels that we set up to assess the proposals that have come in and have been assigned to a panel. So at most, you would likely be assigned one panel, and that could be anywhere from 5. It could be a 1-day or 2-day panel, so anywhere between 5 and 10 proposals. And we tell our reviewers, depending on your review experience, reviewing a proposal could be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. So it's definitely a commitment. But it's also just a great way to not only contribute your voice and expertise to the decisions that are made out of this initiative, but to see what granted proposals look like. So I hope that answered your question. But again, we really want to give as many people as possible an opportunity to review for granted. So as of right now, we have not had repeat reviewers come through panels. So if that helps.
We'll let Lacey decide if that answers her question. I thought that was pretty comprehensive. So My question, I guess, is about the office hours. So you say every Wednesday from 3 until 4. How do I get in touch with you? I mean, is there a number? Is there a website?
Yeah,
How do I
there is.
reach out?
Yeah, so I don't know if folks have another screen, you can do this right now, but if you type in NSF Granted into Google, the website should come up. And there's a lot of resource there. I mean, links to the program description funding opportunity, links to all of the convenings that we funded, in the first round of the initiative. And we've got information there about the Zoom access information for the office hours, which we will update for August. It looks like they're going to end it looks like they may have just ended, but we're actually going to put up August information. So the Zoom, and it's the same Zoom. Yeah. So the tip is it's the same Zoom link as it'll always be the same Zoom link. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It'll always be the same Zoom link, but and then you can also sign up to join the Granted mailing list there as well.
Terrific. If you wanted to stop sharing your screen, we'll see all the
Oh,
little people
sure.
populate, and then people may feel a little more comfortable coming off mic and asking you questions directly. Again, I would just say thank you so much for being here today. I was really looking forward to this.
Good. Thank you, David. Okay, I can see most people.
Hi, Dr. Littlefield. I have a question.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if I see exactly who's answering the question. So
Hi.
okay,
Ross DeBose at
Okay.
USF here.
Hi.
No problem. So it seems to me that one of the more tricky aspects of this is getting commitment for continuing a project after the end of the grant. And I haven't done this for a granted grant yet, but when I've approached people for this type of project in the past, I get a lot of conditional answers to that.
Yep.
If it's successful, if it's in the best interest of the university, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Is that kind of commitment sufficient for what you're looking for to move forward with a granted program?
Yeah. So, believe me, Ross, I mean, yes, that you're not alone. What we want to understand is that there has been some discussion about sustainability. And yes, we understand that sometimes these projects are experimental and they may not turn out the way they're projected to. So, but we would like to understand, if, and I guess the way to think about it is if the investment matches the institution's goals for growth, then thinking about sustainability of the NSF investment would, I think, be a natural extension of how an institution would want to think about keeping that capacity anyway, or growing that capacity. And so really, so yes, we acknowledge it can be experimental. We would like to see a sustainability plan, and there are various ways to do that. We really do want to understand that the project leadership has talked to institutional leadership about, when this does work, how are we going to sustain this momentum?
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome.
I have another question.
Casey.
So aside from just the sheer anxiety, I feel like even the idea of writing a grant, even though I deal with them all the time.
Yep.
The other big obstacle I could foresee would be time commitment. And so I'm curious to know, there's no way I could run a research project on top of my current workload. And so I'm curious to know, how have, I guess, our existing grantees manage that? What kind of time commitment did they get from their institutions? How, I'm not sure exactly what I'm looking for here. Just any information on like how to deal with that, or what people have done.
Sure. Well, sort of off the top of my head, there are a couple ways I can think of. So one is, and I kind of alluded to this when I was stumbling over the facilities, equipment, and other resources document. So in many cases, our administrative research support PIs, the effort that they're committing to a project is considered part of their responsibilities in their role. And so they don't commit any sponsored effort, right? Because they're already being paid to do what they say they're going to do in the project. Now, you can put a proposal through without any effort for the PI, but we still need to understand what that PI is going to do. And the place to write about what a PI or senior personnel who doesn't have committed effort because they don't have the ability to lapse effort with funding. And that's a new concept I just threw in there, to lapse effort with funding, is to put it in the facilities, equipment, and other resources. Now, the other way that they do it, Lacey, is they lapse a portion of their effort, maybe 10%, and they project hiring capacity, bringing in capacity to actually run the project. So, I mean, that's, those are almost two like extremes, but, the middle part of that is that folks are able to, say, I'm going to commit 15% effort, and the project, the award will support 15% of my effort, right? So I carve that out of my normal responsibilities and commit that to the project. So sort of three different ways there that people are doing it. Does that help?
Sure, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Hi, Dean.
Hi, and thank you as always for an absolutely sensational, and it always amazes me. Mostly, I haven't heard it before, having heard you give these presentations so many
Oh,
times.
gosh, wow,
All
thank
this
you.
new stuff.
Yeah, good. Okay, good.
I actually just wanted to throw in one other thing in regard to Lacey's question, which is release time, which pays for somebody else, maybe part-time, maybe buying someone else, maybe buying somebody's consulting time. I think that, and your institution may or may not have an extra service pay provision, which always kind of, is a possibility depending on the amount of time it requires. But really think about release time. I think you would find that, granted, it's pretty generous. Don't, ignore that thing about if you need to, about, you can, our guideline is 2 months. It's just a guideline and not a not an ironclad rule. So
That's right, for
think in
granted.
terms, I really think that's the thing that people in positions like ours need to start thinking about. End of comment.
Thank you. That's a
Thanks,
good thing.
Dean.
I'll make a note of bringing that to folks' attention. You're absolutely right, Dean.
And Albina says you touched on workforce development, but could you please expand on your vision in terms of growing and expanding the research administration, research development as a profession outside of any disciplinary training currently available?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So, we're envisioning growth and we're hoping to see some sort of innovation around what types of roles might be useful for the research administration workforce of the future. Things that I hear people talk about are sort of roles in between pre and post award. And we have one at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. We're super proud of it. He's we call him a research navigator. Is that his title? He sits in between pre and post award, right? And helps new awardees launch their awards. So, accompanies them to the award launch meeting, talks about HR issues or purchasing issues, things that really, tend to like slow down the implementation of a project. So those types of roles, the in-between roles. We've seen people talk about research project management roles, which could be anything from almost like central office project managers that are deployed to research projects. We're funding several new projects, new models for post-award roles. So stay tuned for that. But again, these are, it doesn't have to be new types of roles, but we're also really excited about the way people are framing models to even bring in and set up more traditional types of infrastructure, sponsored programs offices, or research development, and the way folks are sort of scaffolding research development at a central schooling, college, or departmental level, depending on where it's needed. So there's a lot of workforce development opportunity. And I'm even going to share sort of one workforce development opportunity that we've been talking around in the team is, there's a lot of potential for AI to be very helpful for research administration, but research administrators are going to be the ones who are hopefully behind the scenes designing or help designing those AI tools, those research support AI tools. So eventually there's going to be a role for a research administrator that has some idea about how to prompt engineer, how to develop, forms that are machine learning readable. So, thinking sort of outside of the box, even to that extent, is what we're talking about as it relates to workforce development.
That should give you a lot to think about, Albina. I know my brain went off in a bunch of different directions with that answer.
You're like, where is she going with that?
AI is kind of frightening to me. I need to learn to be less afraid. It just scares me a little bit. Lacey, go ahead.
So my sort of external professional focus, like outside of my own job and institution, has been centered around workload measurements and staffing. I think one of the core problems that we have in our profession is a misalignment of how many people we need to do the work.
Yes.
That's been my
You
major
really know about that, Lacey?
Sorry?
Do we even really have any research or any good information about that?
No, but every research administrator will agree with me on this.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Yep.
so that's the thing that's on my mind for the last couple of years. And so I guess I'm sort of trying to gauge, is that the kind of thing, like developing a workload measurement tool that can be plug and play at an institution? You put in your data, spits out a model for like how to the measurement of how many people you need, what types of people, that kind of thing.
Yes, resoundingly. Yes.
Okay.
So then the question is, have you funded anything like that, Dr. Littlefield? Is this something we should be presenting?
We have not funded anything like that. So hopefully everybody knows about how to find what's been awarded out of granted. You can go to the NSF advanced search functionality. And this is going to sound a little complicated, but it's not. You're going to want to put in, when you're searching for what's been funded out of granted, you're going to want to put in 221Y00. If you just search on that program, I think it's a program element code 221Y00, you'll pull up all of the granted awards. And I should say, and I don't think there's a single granted PI out there because there are some granted PIs in this Zoom room. I'm certain that if you saw a granted award that you were interested in, don't hesitate to reach out to the PI on that award and talk to them about how they came to the idea, how they, what it took to develop the proposal. I mean, this is a very collaborative community. We're all pulling in the same direction to increase capacity and capability in this ecosystem.
That was actually something I was thinking too, is that I'd really like to see, every time I give feedback on a convention, or a conference about keynote speakers, it's like, I want to hear from my peers. Faculty are wonderful and I love hearing about their research, but I want to hear from my peers who have gotten NSF granted proposals and are PIs themselves, or have, written textbook or chapters, or written articles, or, so yeah, I'm curious to know if there's an opportunity currently or plans for having, I guess, public or community facing presentations of or conferences, I guess. I know we're early in the granted program, but eventually having conferences where we can go learn about the outcomes of these research projects.
So Lacey, many of the conferences, convenings, and workshops that granted funded initially are starting to come to a close. But if you look at the website, we have up-to-date information about when workshops are going to be held. So if you see something that you're interested in, and most of the workshops are offering some type of participant support to attend, or there's a hybrid, option. So there's that option for granted awarded projects. The next opportunity to hear about granted convening projects is actually going to be at the Ancora National Meeting. So my colleague Alicia Needler is gonna hold a panel that will have three granted PIs, one of which is a significant person in this USF endeavor. So Sandy Justice and her collaborator Catherine Wrench are going to talk, and Sarah Robertson are going to talk about their granted convenings, outcomes, and and future impact. So, and to the extent that we're able to do that at any of the professional society meetings that we can, we will. And actually, I should say at the SRAI meeting in October, so I'll be there, and granted convening by Jennifer Woodward out of Pittsburgh, all about research administration career ladders. That's going to be offered at SRAI, on the backside of SRAI.
Terrific. Now, Gina was wondering, would a single college or a specific individual college within an R1 institution be eligible to enhance its capacity for providing pre and post research services? Would it have to be the institution, or could it be a college within?
No, Gina, that's a great question. And yes, it can be. So again, here's the tip or the trick, is that if you're going to build a model like that, a single institution model, you're going to want to understand the relevance of what you're building in your college or school or college to other similar colleges or schools within the institution, and external to your institution too. So, there are a couple of ways to bring in insight, right? So you could have an advisory board that is made up of folks internal to your institution, but from different schools and colleges. You could have external folks that are participants from school and college level in those roles, on your advisory board. But again, making that model relevant, yes, to transform your institution at the school college level, but then also to be transformative to another school or college within the institution or outside the institution. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Good.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
we see a lot of folks, and rightly too, because we're asking for bold, ambitious things, but you know, a lot of these builds could be bold and ambitious at the school or college level, especially if there's not support there right now.
Yeah, I mean, there can be, unevenness.
That's right. That's
at
right.
R1s. And I was one that hop skipped to an R1 from a smaller institution. And I'm kind of a lone ranger in my college. So it's just the wheels have been going as you've been talking, and I just, I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, we see
Yeah.
a lot of central office builds. We see a lot of central support builds, but yeah, we've got lots of layers, right? School, college, departmental, again, project managers to work with single PIs, perhaps, around a specific project type. There's lots of ideas.
Right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I'm interested in knowing, if this opportunity, obviously it's not a disciplinary opportunity for the faculty, but do you all see value in supporting these types of activities, right? So that you have access to expertise, so you have access to infrastructure, to help you really, grow your research portfolios. That's what Granted is intending to do.
Do we have any faculty here that want to comment on that? The silence is deafening.
They're crickets.
So, I don't mean to put people on the spot, but when I'm hoping, speaking directly to our faculty colleagues, and I think I can speak for all of us who are part of this research support and service infrastructure community, to to advocate if you feel like this type of support and expertise would benefit your research, scholarship, creative activities, advocate for that to your institutional leadership. Tell them about this Granted initiative. You can be part of a Granted proposal. We love to see faculty as implementation partners in cool models to build research development, to build tech transfer, to build research leadership capacity, right? And there's a role. There are just really fascinating roles for faculty who would like to have a taste of the administrative side of research support as well. So. I don't know, are we at time? Are we good?
Well,
Everyone-
we're at 4:30. I have nothing else in chat. Sometimes if I just sit
Happy hour.
quietly, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes if I just sit quietly for just like a minute or so, then, there's somebody with a question and they're just waiting.
It's just waiting. Well, so if you have a question, I didn't, this is a new contact slide that I just put up, but you can get me at K little f at nsf.gov. And again, contact information for Dina, Alicia, and I is on the website. And thank you all for your time today. I mean, it's Friday afternoon, summer afternoon. And I know you have a choice with what you do with your time, so appreciate.
And they chose to come hear you.
That's right. You chose to fly with us today. So
Well, thank you again, Dr. Littlefield. Yeah, it's been great working with you to prep for this, and I was truly looking forward to your presentation. So, yeah.
Thanks to everybody. It was a pleasure to introduce this initiative to folks who hadn't heard it, and to see friends and colleagues as well. So have a good weekend. Take good care.
You too.
Bye-bye.